The Baggies Podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views, and opinions on all things Albion. Join me every week for a new episode of the Baggies Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hello Baggies fans, and welcome to another episode of the Baggies Podcast. Hope you're all well and hope you've all had a fantastic week. Pretty sunny weather around England at the moment, so hopefully you're all getting and making the most of it. Obviously, plenty of transfer rumours being sailing around Twitter, sailing around social networks, sailing around the news reports about West Bromwich Albion, comings and goings out of the club and into the club. We're going to be addressing all of those in today's episode. Plenty of things, plenty of you guys getting involved as well in this episode, as you always are, ever reliable. So make sure that if you enjoy this episode, you go and drop a follow or a download on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really helps me as well. And also, if you're on YouTube, make sure you drop a like and a subscribe. So without further ado, let's get into some transfer rumour action. And obviously, you guys have been getting involved yet again. You're always spot on with your transfer speculation. You guys always bring in who you'd like to sign. So without further ado, let's get straight into this episode of the Baggies Podcast. It's episode 6. Let's go.
The Baggies Podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views, and opinions on all things Albion. Join me every week for a new episode of the Baggies Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
So, as always, plenty to discuss, and we're going to start by sifting through some news reports which have caught my eye over the past week. Obviously, lots of fake news can come around during a transfer window, and with myself personally, I like to see the player in the shirt before I start believing things, or before I start getting in to transfer, start getting into the rumours that could be prevailing. Obviously, lots of rumours come around, lots of news reports that can be fake and some can be real. But obviously, I prefer to see the player in the shirt before I start to get myself excited. Because with West Brom, we tend to leave things pretty late. We tend to leave things, pretty towards the end of the window before getting in some big name players. So at the moment, I'm not remaining hopeful that we'll bring in anybody especially soon. I mean, I'd love to. I'm not hopeful. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I'm not too hopeful that anything will happen quite so yet. But there are quite a few rumours that we need to sift our way through, and obviously you guys love hearing your transfer. I've heard a lot of positive reactions on Twitter to the podcast, so lots of players been talking, being talked about and things like that. So we're going to have a look at some of the transfer listed players. So West Bromwich Albion firstly remain in the race for Wigan Athletic left back Anthony Robinson, but have hit an obstacle with regards to his wages. Fulham are said to offer 50k a week, and Albion unlikely to match that. So I can't see why we wouldn't want to match that. I'd say Gibbs. I think Gibbs is on £55,000 a week, and we're set to offload him. So surely we could use that money and just get in a not light flight as in quality of player. I think Anthony Robinson now is going to be a quality player and better than Kieran Gibbs, because obviously Gibbs, I think he's got a few injury problems, and I think he's struggling at the moment to keep up with regular football. So maybe a Championship club might come and pay say somebody like £3 million. I wouldn't want to see Gibbs leave, in a hurry. He's not a bad player at all, but we're in the Premier League. It's a ruthless world, and obviously things need to be happening, and we need to make sure we got the best squad to see it in the Prem. And obviously we need to do things like that. And Anthony Robinson looks a good player for me. Nearly signed for AC Milan if it wasn't for a medical fail, I think it was. So, and had to go straight back to Wigan, but obviously available for just £2 million, I think, or something like that. I think it's £2 million and £50,000 a week. And if we're paying Gibbs £55,000 a week, why aren't we trying to change that? Why aren't we trying to, get somebody in who's younger, fresher face? He's a young lad, Anthony Robinson. I can't remember how old he is, but I will check now. But he's a good young lad, and he's going to come in and hopefully do a good job. He'd be our starting left back, I think. Very solid individual, shown a lot of potential. Shame he's gone down with Wigan, because obviously I feel for Wigan. They've had the club sort of ruined, I guess, by owners, and they managed to get himself a point deduction. But he's 23 years of age, Anthony Robinson. Had a good season for Wigan last year and has looked really good since lockdown. But for $2 million, he's a steal in my opinion. And I can't. When's he going to play for Fulham? They've already got Joe Bryan, who's a very good player. And so why would they need him? He'd probably maybe go. There's a potential of him going and playing second string to Joe Bryan. I can't let that happen. I wouldn't want to let that happen if I was Albion, and see a player like that being sort of just chucked away. I wouldn't really want to see him just going to Fulham playing second string, and then West Bromwich Albion, missing out on a top quality left back and a first choice left back. So hopefully we'll get that deal done. Maybe Sheffield United, I've heard that they were in for him. Obviously, this is a reliable source. I think this is a guy from. Where's he from? He's a football journalist, so I'd hope that he is a reliable source. I think he. It's Alan Nixon on Twitter, so yeah, a lot of people seem to rely on him for transfer news. So I'd hope that his sources are reliable, and I hope that I'm not spreading any fake news, because obviously that's been a thing in the Albion fan base on Twitter over the past week. About fake news, who's saying the right things and who's not. So I'd hope on this podcast we can keep things relatively true. We don't tend to spread any false rumours. But at the moment, Anthony Robinson, hopefully we'll get him in. And if Gibbs is transfer listed, then hopefully we can bring in somebody of a better quality and of a younger quality as well. Hopefully somebody who's going to bring younger, fresher blood to the squad. Another sort of rumour that I've seen bandied around, this is actually from the Daily Mail, so I'd assume this is a proper good source. Daily Mail for me, I think, is decent regarding football news. Turkish side Trabzonspor are interested in signing transfer listed Oliver Burke and have inquired about the possibility of a permanent deal. Former Baggies assistant Eddie Newton, remember him, now manages the club and has opened talks with Burke and Bilic. I think Burke I think if he was ever going to make it, it would probably be in the Championship, and then he'd make his step up. He won't. I don't think he'll just come straight into the Premier League now and set the world alight, in my opinion. He's one of those players that needs bedding in now. Probably needed bedded in last season or the season before in the Championship, but instead he's been on loan, and then making that step up to the Premier League. It shouldn't really be the Premier League first for me. I think that's just not a good move for the Baggies. He is a potentially good player. He's very fast. He's very fast, obviously, and he's got a good range of skills about him. Obviously, very dynamic player, very direct, quite tall as well. So maybe good in the air sometimes. Haven't seen enough of him to really judge him that much. But 15 million, he was our record signing at one point, wasn't he? He'd overtaken Nasser Chadli, and I just feel like that's too much to be paying for him. I think. Nobody's going to pay 15 million. I think we'll be lucky if we get maybe 4 or 5 for him. I think 4 or 5's probably a decent sort of shout for him. Obviously, could be a good player in the future for somebody, but it's not really. It's just not. It's not good for Burke at West Brom. I think his time here is over. I think he had that game against Leicester, I think it was, where he assisted Rondon in the first half, and then we fell to pieces and lost about 4-1. So that's not good, really. I just can't believe that we let a talent like that go. And he's obviously a very good player in his own right, Ollie Burke, but he's just not going to make it now at West Bromwich Albion. I think he'd have to probably go to a Championship club first and then get promoted to be in with a chance of playing for a Premier League team. And I think he's a good player, but I just don't think he's got his time at Albion sorted out. I feel like he's ran out of chances, really. I think he's had enough games to now prove it, and I don't think Bilic fancies him, so I can just see him just going out the window. I think 4 million's a good talk. Like that, 4 million for Burke, 4 or 5 million would be absolutely fine for me. I think that would work, and I think it would just work. I think he just needs to go, personally. I guess so. Moving on from Burke, so it looks like he could be heading in the direction of Turkey. I mean, there's so much news coming out of Turkey at the moment. Obviously, we've had Kamil Grosicki rumoured to be going to Besiktas. Obviously, that's just been rubbished by Kamil. Love that from him. Obviously, not playing about with any of that. Then we've had Ollie Burke. We've also had this right back, been rumoured. Obviously, and Domagoj Vida as well. So plenty of transfer news coming out of Turkey over the past few weeks for West Bromwich Albion. But it's now time to talk about it's now time to talk about some other players moving on from Burke, other players that have apparently been put on the transfer list by West Bromwich Albion. So according to this is John Percy, Midlands football reporter for the Daily Telegraph and Sunday Telegraph. So reliable source there. Kieran Gibbs been transfer listed, Sam Field, Jonathan Lecco, Ollie Burke and Kenneth Zahor. So we're going to count down there and see what sort of money we could potentially get for all of those players and how much we could, all player sales apparently going towards the transfer budget, and hopefully we can get some players with that money. So apparently the chief executive has said that all the player sales are coming towards the transfer budget this season, so none of it's really going. Apparently this is obviously could be telling lies, so things about football like that and money, very difficult, very touchy subject, and especially after the period we just had. And so we're still working on that, and hopefully we'll get that sorted out and see what sort of money we have to play with in this transfer window. So Kieran Gibbs, I'd say 3 million for Kieran Gibbs, maybe 2 million. I think if we could get that sort of money for him, maybe we could make that work. Sam Field, I don't want to see him go. I like Sam Field, nice tidy player. I just can't see him getting the game time. Maybe another loan might be the case if they pay his wages for us. Then I think that would be alright. 1 million for Sam Field, I think. Probably 1 million or 2 million for Lecco, considering it actually probably more 1 million considering his injury problem at the moment. He won't be able to play for a bit. Ollie Burke, as I said, if we can get 4 million for him, 4 million for Kenneth Zahor would probably do me. Kenneth, I felt like he should have been given more chances. I'm not saying anything he's done at the Hawthorns has been necessarily good enough, but surely when neither Harrobson Kanu or Charlie Austin became regular goal scorers, surely there should have been more room for him, in my opinion. But I'll save that because he is on his way out essentially, and he's. He could be going for 4 million. I think a Championship club would be willing to take a punt on him. I don't know, I'm just plucking names. I say somebody like Bristol City would sign somebody like Kenneth Zahor. Yeah, so it could be the case, might not be the case. So hopefully we get rid of those players. If maybe not Sam Field, I'd like to see him stay. I've always been a big advocate for Sam Field. Liked him in the Premier League, liked his work sometimes in the Championship, so I'd love to see Sam Field stay. It would be a shame to let him go. Another thing we kind of touched on last week was the loan of Josh Griffiths to Cheltenham Town from West Bromwich Albion. So it's a good signing, I guess, for Cheltenham Town, and I'd say a better signing for us, because obviously Cheltenham don't know what they're going to get, but it's a young goalkeeper who's going to go and get his chance at a League 2 pushing League 1 club. And if any of you have seen the video, any of you listening have seen the video on Cheltenham Town's Twitter of him making save after save after save, was fantastic for me. It was in training, give you that, but he looked really good for me. Making save after save, starting to show his stuff in a Cheltenham Town training kit. Obviously, it was only training, so can't really start to get ahead of ourselves. But he did look really good for me. Another young goalkeeper. We've got Alex Palmer still, come back from his loan at Plymouth. And maybe, it could be the case that we have a look at Josh Griffiths and Alex Palmer and start to maybe integrate them into the first team. It's been a while since maybe a young goalkeeper's come through here at the Hawthorns from our academy. And it'd be nice to see one of those. Obviously, we've got such a fantastic academy. Obviously, having lots of great players. And we got so many great players coming out of the academy. It would be great to see more of the goalkeeping element of that implemented, I suppose. Finn Azaz as well, gone to Cheltenham Town. I think Tavon Campbell as well has gone there on a loan deal. So that's great to see. I like the idea of that. Finn Azaz looks to be a good player for the future, looks to be a bright, creative midfielder. And at the moment, for me, Alex Palmer, I'd like to see him getting involved in the first team, even if that's just an FA Cup becoming second place. As I don't know if Jonathan Bond's gone. I don't know if I haven't actually checked about that and seen if Jonathan Bond has I'm actually going to have a look at that, because if so, I want Alex Palmer as my number 2 this year. I don't know whether that's instead of Johnston or whether that's with no Johnston. Yeah, he still plays for West Bromwich Albion at the moment. So, but in that case, I'd still like to see Alex Palmer. Maybe let Bond go to another Championship club. I mean, it's nothing personal with me. I always thought Bond looked quite bright, but if he hasn't broken into this first team last season when Johnston was making mistakes, I can't see him breaking in at any points. If that's any consolation. So it's just a difficult situation for West Brom to be in at the moment with the goalkeeping department, which we're going to talk a bit more about in a minute. But Josh Griffiths, again, great to see him getting some first team action at Cheltenham Town, and hopefully maybe one for the future and one that can break into the first team very, very soon. Actually, now we're on the topic, let's go on to talk about the goalkeeping situation at West Bromwich Albion. I've had a couple of questions from you guys which you wanted me to answer in the podcast, so I'm gonna obviously answer that later on in this episode and talk about that a bit more. 2 questions coming in from you guys, so I'll talk about those and answer those towards the end of the podcast. But the goalkeeping situation is an interesting one, because I haven't actually seen us linked with that many goalkeepers. Joe Hart, right at the end of the season, I saw that. So it was it was something that I've had a look at, and there's plenty of situations that we need to monitor, but I just don't know what to do with the goalkeeping situation. I feel like if Sam Johnston were to leave the club now, I feel like, actually I do, let's go back to Sam Johnston at Villa. You have to feel like that Sam Johnston was Golden Glove winner at Villa. Golden Glove. If he really impressed Villa that much, why didn't they fork out the £5 million to pay for Johnston? The £5 million that they have happily forked out for various goalkeepers since. If Sam Johnston was that good, why didn't they pick him up and say, you know what, you'll be our number 1 when we get to the Premier League? I mean, yeah, it just baffles me, as to why we. I like him as a shot stopper. I just feel he needs to. If it's something that can be coach it, and make sure that he is ready for the Premier League, because there are fantastic strikers, there are fantastic defenders coming up from corners that are going to probably, exploit that weakness. I don't want him out. I'm not saying I want him out my club and I want him, gone immediately. He's just one of those, if it's something that can be coached, coach it, please, because it's just something that can be picked on by Premier League, defenders coming up from corners, strikers in the box. It's just something that can be picked up, that's all. If Villa, liked him so much, if Villa, if he was so good, why didn't Villa pay £5 million, which they've easily paid for that flop, that idiot Nyland, who came in for big money, in all fairness, from Norway. So I feel like it's something that we need to look at, and we need to monitor the situations of goalkeepers around the country and around different countries. I would have wanted Ramsdale, but 20 million for a keeper at this rate, it's not a priority, I guess. It's not it's something that we may be able to get away with. And I stress the may in that, it's something that we could perhaps be able to get away with in the Premier League. You might just fall lucky and find out that no defenders were stood in the right place. But I can't see that happening. I will see, you will see Premier League, if Johnston plays in the Premier League, you'll see players mounting up on him in the goal line and trying to pen him in, not like he's already penned in anyway, but it's just one of those that you're going to have to talk about, and one of those that you're just going to have to look at. Slaven Bilic, whether he wants him as the number 1 next season is just going to be up to him. It's all down to Slaven now. If not, I've got a couple of suggestions for me. Another one is Martin van der Voort, and he plays for Anderlecht. I'm not sure whether he's been playing first team football for them, but we'll have a look. Van der Voort, he's young. He certainly is young. I think he's 18 years of age. Plays for Genk. I apologise. Did play for Anderlecht, but now plays for Genk. Been playing football for Genk. Played a few matches this season. I like him. I think I've seen the matches, good saves that he's been making. I like him, and I think maybe an option there. Aaron Ramsdale for 20 million, no thank you. I would have liked Ramsdale, but not now. It's just a tricky situation. There's maybe somebody who's going second string at one of the clubs. Adrian from Liverpool, possibility. Ben Foster, would love to have him back. Would love more than anything to have him back. Probably my first choice in all fairness. So Ben Foster, always first choice for me. Great servant to the club. Great work, when he played for us, and I love him to bits, if I'm being completely honest. Always loved, bantering with Dingle fans on Twitter. So always a big fan of Ben Foster. Would love to have him back, take him back in a heartbeat. Wouldn't take Dawson back so much, but however, we move on with that. So it's lots of things. Suggest, if you feel free to tweet me on Twitter, with your suggestions for a goalkeeper, because that would be really helpful. Maybe next podcast we'll go and do a breakdown. And if you'd like to come on the podcast, if you're listening to this now, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to let you come on and have your thoughts, rather than you just tweeting something through. If you want to just give me, I'll give you a call at some point, and you can just voice your opinion. But that's not the end of the podcast. Obviously, we've still got plenty more to discuss, and we're going to talk about all your questions which you've asked over on Twitter. So a couple of questions coming in from you guys as we head towards the end of the podcast. It's actually been quite a long episode, but for me it's going to drag a bit longer. So Tyrell Bullock obviously gave his opinions, when we did our end of season review, always getting involved. So we're going to answer his question. He would like to know about the Shane Duffy situation. So this is one that's really caught my eye over the past couple of days, because things have been advancing apparently. I say apparently. There's quite a few different it's quite a few different signings. So here is one. So there's quite a few different stories, is what I'm trying to give you, different perspectives, so you can make up your own mind about who's reliable. I'm not entirely sure about reliable sources. All I know is Joseph Massey from Express & Star, he's in contact with the club, and when he says something, it's true and he knows it. So I always trusting Joseph Massey from the Star, but nothing from Shane Duffy. Apparently there's interest. So let's start by talking. West Brom are in the driving seat to sign Brighton defender Shane Duffy. So so that was a few days ago apparently, but then there's been advances. There's been multiple stories saying Celtic are in the driving seat. His preferred destination is Celtic. Then there's his preferred destination is West Ham. I'm doing mad hand movements here, but yeah, you get my gist. There's been plenty of interest all over the UK. A couple of, obviously Scotland's abroad technically, but UK, get what I mean. And apparently Celtic's his boyhood club, and West Ham are also interested, but we're also interested. So it's, who knows? Apparently we're about to beat Celtic. Apparently he's about to sign for West Brom. Set medical. I'm seeing so many things, it's hard to make out what's true. So I'll go through the sources. Rob Dorset's Sky said 5 days ago that he's about to sign for West Brom. Didn't happen, obviously. According to sources close to the club, he's about to sign for West Brom. Quite a few people saying that he's going to sign for West Brom. So, I'd like to see Shane Duffy at the club for a reasonable price. He's a great player at set pieces, both in his area and outside of his area. But at the moment, from what I understand, from what I'm seeing on Twitter and from what I'm seeing around the club, is that Shane Duffy looks to be signing and veering in the direction of West Bromwich Albion, not Celtic at the current stage in the proceedings. So take that however you will. Take that with a pinch of salt. Don't get excited yet until you've seen him in the shirt. That's all I'm saying for West Bromwich Albion fans. But at the moment, he's veering towards West Bromwich Albion. The next question coming in from SFC C88426395. So he has asked, what are the 3 priority signings we have to make this window? For me, number 1, striker. Has to be a striker. I don't think you mean that you want me to list a player, because I can't really list a player. I struggle with finding these players myself, let alone the club finding them. But I'll give you my 3 priority position signings. Firstly, striker. Striker for me has to be done. For me, he's, Slaven's got to get in a good striker. For me, Charlie Austin and Harry Robson-Kanu cannot surely, and Kenneth Sahor obviously, but he looks to be out the door at the moment. That rhymes. But however, it looks like Kanu and Austin will not be able to cope with Premier League football. I say that now, and I say that with a whole Charlie Austin needs to stay at the club for me. I'd like to see him, stick around, but I suppose he's got quite a high wage bill, so it could be, but he's not on the transfer list, so there's got to be a reason for that, because Bilic likes him. So I'd like to keep him on the bench, around the club, maybe third choice, second choice striker at the worst. So that's what I'd like to do with striker. Another position, box-to-box midfielder. I don't see why that hasn't been the priority this window. Livermore and Sawyers, you saw some faults with them last season. It's that perhaps they don't advance forward enough. Jake does it, but he's not a forward player. That's the only thing. He's a battler in the midfield. So yeah, maybe a box-to-box midfielder. Somebody like Abdoulaye Doucouré. I'd like to take a punt at him if he's available at Watford for good money. I don't think he will be, but perhaps that's the case. So yeah, Doucouré for me has to come into, has to be one that we look at least, inquire, see the price. If you don't like the price, move away. But we'll have a look at Doucouré, hopefully. Goalkeeper, again, for me, is the third position I'd have to strengthen. Maybe even a left-back, goalkeeper or left-back. Yeah, goalkeeper for me, Sam Johnston. I'm not sure about him. And maybe I'd like to see somebody younger, fresher come in. Somebody with a bit of potential on them. Or maybe even a second string from another club, as we talked about with the goalkeeping situation earlier. So that's my three positions that desperately need strengthening. Yeah, so it's dependent on Slaven, on who we get in, but I do trust him. I trust the club now. I wouldn't have trusted them perhaps a couple of years ago coming up. So yeah, we'll see. Yes, as always, thank you very much for listening and joining me for the Baggies Podcast, episode 6. Always a pleasure to have you all joining us. We've been really performing well with stats and things like that recently, and viewer engagement. So thank you very much for joining me for this podcast. Thank you very much for giving your thoughts. Again, if you'd like to come on the podcast, if you're a fan, or if you just like, or if you run a separate page or a separate podcast, you'd like to come in and talk all things Albion, or talk, even if you're not an Albion fan, I say, for example, we've been linked with Shane Duffy at Brighton. If you're a Brighton fan or something and you just happen to be listening to this and you'd like to talk about that, join, give me a shout and we'll talk about that transfer. It's not, it doesn't have to be all West Brom all the time. Obviously, it's the Baggies podcast, but we'd like to keep it fairly related to West Brom. But it doesn't have to be, sole Baggies, only Baggies fans allow. And on occasionally. So if you're a Baggies fan and you'd like to come on the podcast, just give me a quick message and I'll, happily ring you up at some point and we can have a chat about and you can give your thoughts. But again, many thanks for joining me for this episode. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Make sure you drop a follow and a download on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's been a pleasure having you on this episode 6 of the Baggies Podcast. Have a great week and I'll see you next Monday. Goodbye.